Well, it's Tuesday, March 22nd, 2022. Good morning, I'm Andy Johnson. This is how we get the action going here at WES. And this is AM Prime for this morning. Let's tell you what's coming down the pike over the next hour and a half or so. We'll be talking with Ms. Ava Balaj. She's a consumer advocate at the Ministry of Trade and Industries. The discussion began last week with one of her colleagues. And this week we're talking about the question of addressing what is called fair digital finance, respecting and protecting consumer rights. So we'll get to her in the second part of the program. We'll take you around the region. We surely wanted to update you on the story. Remember, in July sometime last year, there were these protests across the streets in many parts of Cuba, calling for democracy, challenging the government and certain aspects of the governance there in that country in the Caribbean. Well, from that, there's a story here that dozens of protesters who joined that nationwide revolt have been jailed for up to 30 years. A total of 127 persons were convicted for treason and vandalism for those actions in July last year. We're also talking about something called co-parenting, a program that is in cycle 2. That's from the Ministry of Sport and Community Development, their community mediation services. Renee Williams and Mr. Fidel Sanatan will bring us up to date on that, what it means, co-parenting in the interest of the child, they say. But right now, with us in the Zoom, Mr. Kelvin Morris. He's the minority leader in the Tobago House of Assembly. He made a statement last week. We want to try and get behind it. He was saying that the assistant chief or the deputy chief secretary, Mr. Watson Duke, should answer some questions about spending on that trip he made to Dubai some weeks ago. Mr. Morris, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Andy. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, good to have you. Well, let me first ask, how are you managing, generally speaking, being sort of by yourself, together with them? So there's one minority councillor, right? How
Yes.
are things?
We've been really planning our work program, trying to make sure, first and foremost, we get out there understanding the needs of the people of Tobago so that we can better represent their concerns, their issues. So we've been doing a series of walkabouts. We did one throughout Scarborough, and it was quite interesting, the number of concerns people have at this time. And we just continue to really be the voice of the people.
So share with us some of the concerns that people have.
Well, of course, we know unemployment is still a very big issue, especially coming out of the pandemic. And you would quite understand as well, persons like business people in the Scarborough area, they are quite concerned about the Scarborough redevelopment program that is going on, the consultations. They are concerned as to what would be their situation once the construction phase begins, because persons are asking questions like, will we be relocated? Will our buildings be purchased? So there's a lot of confusion, a lot of concern there with that as well. And the person just generally wanted to engage us on governance issues as well. The Dubai trip being one of those.
Yeah, and governance issues. So that is one. Are they looking at how the new administration is performing and raising questions?
Definitely. So persons are concerned about the slow rate of delivery, because as you know, a lot of the programs in Tobago would have been suspended. So there are a lot of road programs that are currently incomplete. There are a number of development programs as well that are also incomplete. So, there's a lot of instability. There's a lot of insecurity at this time as well in Tobago, because persons just don't know what are the plans of this new administration. They have not articulated a clear plan for Tobago, and now so a lot of people are left in abeyance, are left not knowing what tomorrow will bring.
So the administration is not outlining those things, at least sufficiently for the people's satisfaction and comfort?
So at this time, no, there's no clear work program of the administration. As a matter of fact, we were told that there would have been some low-hanging fruits delivery programs. And even those programs that they would have outlined, such as the paving of the Pigeon Point entrance, the construction of a bridge at Gogo Patch, and these kind of things, none of these things have taken root as far as of now. There have not been no action on these plans, and we're really not seeing any real new programs being kicked off by this new administration. So there's really a level of disappointment and disillusionment, because this government was elected overwhelmingly, and persons had high expectations of what they would have delivered, because you would recall their mantra coming into government was, let us fix this. And thus far, persons are quite disappointed that, some of the challenges, some of the issues are still yet to be addressed.
So you think some people are, questioning how they may have voted already?
Well, after 100 days, that's quite the situation. In fact, I saw recently one young man would have indicated that since the coming into this administration, he would have lost his job. And, their mantra was actually to ensure that every Tobagonian would get employment. But so far, instead of more persons being employed, more persons are losing jobs. In fact, persons are being victimized as well. There are persons who, because they are they're believed to be PNM, they are being targeted in the Department of Community Development. One cultural officer who would have been there for over 10 years, she would have been fired because, of course, they believe that she's PNM. And this is going on the backdrop of a promise that there will be no justice for persons with big red flags coming after the elections.
You said there would be no what?
You would recall Mr. Duke, during the 2020 elections, did indicate that once the PDP was successful, there would be no justice for persons who carry about the big red flags. So in other words, he was saying there will be no justice for persons who support the PNM. And we are already seeing that happening. In fact, even their supporters continue to call for persons who are employed in positions of influence that they believe is PNM. They are calling for them to be fired.
So that is sort of actively taking place, you're saying?
That is actively taking place in Tobago at this time.
Going into the elections and part of the campaigning for the elections, this question was raised as to the percentage of people in Tobago who depend on the assembly for their livelihoods, and people were saying that something was wrong with that. The percentage of people whose jobs are with the THA sort of minimize people's sense of independence, and that was the creation of a kind of state of dependency, and one would have expected that that would have been treated with. You're saying, what are you saying? That is the case, but you're saying it's operating such that people are being victimized?
Well, yes, definitely persons. In fact, in the division of infrastructure, an entire department was sent home. That is the monitoring and evaluation department. And there are a number of cases where persons who would have enjoyed continuous contract renewal, their contracts are not being renewed. There are persons whose contracts are being terminated as well. And we must remember, while it is easy to point fingers at the Tobago House of Assembly with respect to employment, we have to appreciate that Tobago is not as fortunate as Trinidad, where you have the eminence of industrial, all those industrial companies, manufacturing companies, and a robust private sector. So because of that, the THA is compelled to create opportunities within and without the THA. And we are saying that, of course, going forward, we'll always and should always seek to expand and strengthen the private sector. But at the same time, the THA has a role to play while we build out a robust private sector here in Tobago.
And so that you believe that this attempt at reducing the numbers, and as you say, by sort of picking at people who are presumed to be PNM, it's operating to the disadvantage of the country and to the people. When I say the country, the island.
Definitely, and you would recall as well, even the chief secretary went as far as to say that, you know, they will be treating with political appointees and, you know, justifying closing down some of these units. He actually used the word that they were political appointments. So it's clearly there's a clear sense of victimization when it comes to the treatment and termination of employees. So it's not simply a case of looking at what is necessary, what is required, and what is best for Tobago, but it's a case of really trying to clean out house.
What is your sense, personally, and then you could probably address it from the position of the party generally, that Mr. Augustine is operating as his own man, or that he's really, his strings are being pulled by the other fellow?
Well, it's clear that Mr. Augustine is definitely being controlled by Mr. Duke, because when you look at him creating an entire office of the Deputy of Chief Secretary, this has never been the situation before. In fact, presidents would dictate that the Deputy Chief Secretary always fulfilled a secretarial portfolio. And in this situation, Mr. Duke is given a Deputy Chief Secretary position all by himself. And we are told that that Deputy Chief Secretary will now have his own set of staffing arrangements. So what we really have is two parallel chief secretaries operating both at the same time. And it seemed like Mr. Duke is the chief secretary of international affairs, where he would handle all the Tobago foreign direct investment decisions. And Mr. Augustine will treat with the Tobago matters. So we really have a two-headed monster operating in Tobago at this time.
Right, and it is in that context that you'd say that Mr. Duke went to this thing in Dubai, and you're raising questions about the expenses for that, the expenditure for that.
Of course, and what is interesting about this trip, Mr. Johnson, is the fact that the delegation the actual events were on the 10th and the 11th. The official delegation, of which Mr. Duke should have been a part, departed Trinidad and Tobago on the 8th and would have arrived in time to participate in this expo in Dubai. However, Mr. Duke would have demanded that he leave the shores of Tobago on the 6th of March, right? Which would have ensured that he had 2 extra days basically to enjoy himself in Dubai at the expense of taxpayers. And we have called on Mr. Augustine to explain what was the reason that necessitated Mr. Duke being in Dubai this early. And to this point, we have not had such explanation as to what activities Mr. Duke would have had to engage in that would have required him to be in Dubai so early. And that again shows that Mr. Duke is his own man. Mr. Duke is doing his own thing. When you look at the actual presentation, it also begs the question, who authorized and approved that presentation? That presentation was a presentation simply on the city of Roxborough, a conversation that was never had nowhere, in no space in Tobago. However, that presentation made its way. And ironically, you would think that at this time, the THA is discussing the redevelopment of Scarborough. And that redevelopment requires a lot of funding. And you would think that that would have been the one that would have made its way as a presentation in Dubai. You would think that the Cove Eco-Industrial Complex would have made its way in Dubai as a presentation. And then we have a number of shovel-ready tourism investment projects in Tobago that could have been showcased, but none of those made its way in Mr. Duke's presentation. So clearly it was Mr. Duke, again, doing his own thing. And this is why there's so much people in Tobago are so concerned at this time as to who is really running the THA. Is it Mr. Duke or Mr. Augustine?
All right, let's just understand something. He said, so he went two days ahead of the rest of the team?
Yes, of course, Mr. Duke was left on the 6th. In fact, Mr. Augustine declared he's an Adventist, and he had to leave church on the 6th to sign off documents to ensure that Mr. Duke was able to travel on the 6th. So it's clearly Mr. Duke having his way. And the fact that Mr. Augustine had to sign off documents on the 6th meant that even the Executive Council, which meets on every Wednesday of the week, would not have had a prior knowledge of this trip. And you must also remember, not even the people of Tobago was told that Mr. Duke was going on this trip. It was a secret trip until the questions began. We began asking the questions.
So there has to be some kind of reporting in the assembly about it, and you're saying that there's no indication as to when that will happen.
Exactly. And in fact, as far as I know, the delegation would have returned. Of course, you are seeing a number of other videos being posted by Mr. Duke, but so far we have not had a word on what would have transpired in Dubai. We have not had that report. We don't have a clue as to whether there was any FDI interest, if there were any prospective investors. We do not know what were the nature of Mr. Duke's engagement between the 7th to the 10th, that is the 3 days leading up to the expo itself. And there's still a number of questions as to even, in terms of the per diem, what was paid, what was not paid. Mr. Augustine said the government of Trinidad and Tobago was responsible for some aspects of Mr. Duke's trip. I'm hearing that Mr. Duke made his own hotel arrangements contrary to what was agreed. And so there's a number of questions, a number of issues over Mr. Duke's involvement in this trip in Dubai.
So that, from my understanding of how parliamentary affairs work, that there has to be a motion in the adjournment, as they would say in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, to get a matter like that aired. How are you going about doing that?
Well, we have already tabled some questions to the Chief Secretary, because like the Parliament, we have the Chief Secretary questions and answers segment. And we have tabled questions on the Dubai, which also calls for a report. I've seen the order paper for this month's sitting, which happens on Thursday. And usually, if there was to be any report being laid in the Assembly Legislature, it would have indicated there's a report. But thus far, we have seen no report. And although we were promised by Mr. Augustine that Mr. Duke will report to the Tobago population when he returns, we have not seen that report laid in the Assembly Legislature, and I would think that is a perfect platform for such a report to be laid.
So you will keep the emphasis on that until that happens?
Of course, Mr. Duke has a duty to report to the people of Tobago. It was Tobagonian taxpayers, Trinidad and Tobago tax-paying money that sent him to Dubai. And of course, in fact, he went. The cost of the trip was over $147,000 as indicated by the Chief Secretary. So that's a lot of money, especially in these very trying times where resources are quite scarce. So it is imperative that Mr. Duke reports to the people of Tobago an account on his stewardship outside of Dubai.
All right, so associated with that, what do you make of his reported intentions to bring the PDP to Trinidad?
Well, this is quite curious because you may recall Mr. Duke did campaign in Tobago on the premise that the PDP is a standalone Tobago party. And part of his campaign also was very anti-Trinidadian. In fact, he called Trinidad the colonizers of Tobago. So it is quite difficult to comprehend how in one breath you would see Trinidad as the colonizers and see your party as, the revolutionary party to free Tobago from Trinidad. And now you're now trying to go into Trinidad to now be, the party of choice in Trinidad. So I'm quite curious as to how he would justify to Trinidadians his party being the solution when he indicated that Trinidad was in fact the problem. So we look on with a level of interest, because I know the people of Trinidad are discerning people, and I am sure they would ask the questions.
All right, it seems there's a lot to keep you active and energized as the sole elected person in that assembly, Mr. Morris. But
there's definitely a lot, and we'll keep the issues, front of mind and continue to advocate on behalf of the people of Tobago.
All right, it appears that you have, a good measure of support from people on the streets.
Yeah, well, definitely, because one of the things I keep doing, I'm very much in touch with the people on the ground. I walk my community twice every week. I'm also out in other communities, treating with issues. So I'm very grounded. I'm someone that really believes in the mantra that politics is truly about people. And at the end of the day, once you stay with the people, it makes it very easy to advocate on their behalf, because you're really telling the story of real people and real issues.
All right, Mr. Morris, thank you very much for sharing those perspectives, those thoughts with us, those position issues with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Andy.
You're very welcome. That's Mr. Kelvin Morris, the minority leader in the Tobago House of Assembly, coming out of the last the election in the THA a couple of months ago. We will take a break. When we come back, we share with you the numbers for COVID-19 and other stuff, the Newsday poll and the responses to that before we go, and as we go forward. Stay with us.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers?
Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best.
I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WASN,
the content capital.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit?
Yes.
What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive, it is not rehabilitative.
We the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
So, Simone, in these times, things are very difficult. Life has changed dramatically.
Many people have experienced mental health issues for the first time. So people who have just managed to keep anxiety at bay are experiencing a lot of anxiety now.
I am talking with another one of the major pillars of the women's senior national team. Her name is Ria Belgrave. She's actually center defense. Ria is now part again of the CONCACAF preparation for the World Cup 2023. What's up, Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN, Content Capital.
If you live with someone who's tested positive for COVID-19 and has to self-isolate at home, take care of them from a distance and reduce their movement around the house. Give them space, a designated space, and open those windows. If you have to be in contact, mask up, both of you. If you work, stay home from work and don't go out. Not even to the grocery or pharmacy. And remember, no visitors allowed. Limit the contact to limit the spread.
The Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society. Mission-based, people-focused, community-driven.
Welcome back to the program. Up ahead, a discussion with Mr. Fidel Sanatan and Ms. Renee Williams. They are from the Community Mediation Services Division of the Ministry of Sport and Community Development, something called co-parenting, and in dispute resolution, co-parenting for the child's benefit. But before we get there, let's show you the numbers, and we'll take the Newsday poll and the responses. So those are the numbers this morning, compiled at the end of the day yesterday, well, it's March 21st. 121,831, that's the totally recovered patients from COVID-19 in our midst. 9,781, the total active positive cases in the country. The deaths from COVID-19 thus far, 3,716. 135,328, the total positive cases counted in the country when we began that checking on March 12, 2020 to yesterday. 231, the new positive cases reported in the previous 24 hours, and 189. That's the number of persons in hospitals with COVID-19 in what is called the parallel healthcare system. That number keeps dropping, and well, I was going to say relentlessly, but not necessarily, but appreciably it's going down, and that means there's less stress on the system and less cause to worry about whether we can cope, whether the people providing those healthcare services can cope, and that's one of the silver linings behind what we're talking about for the last 2 years and more. So that's where the numbers stand this morning as we get ready to go about our business on this new day. So here's the Newsday poll. The question is, do you believe enough attention is paid to instances of gender-based violence against men? Give reasons for your answer. One response is no, because society has it that men are supposed to be this mentality, impenetrable and strong group, whereas women are viewed as the fragile, weak group. So when men are on the end of violence from women, it is more often than not laughed at by an already uneducated society. Another response, I hate to be all doom and gloom, but if one were to gauge purely by public attention, protest, how long a given story gets media time, I'd conclude that no one cares when it happens to men. And as a matter of fact, I've seen some comments of women fishing for reasons solely based on a headline and nothing else, why the female perpetrator may have been right for harming the man. Response number 3, gender-based violence is a white-collar dialect that asserts that violent people choose victims based on gender. There's violence on male Ukrainians from male Russian leadership. Is that violence gender-based? Those are the responses to the question this morning. Do you believe enough attention is paid to instances of gender-based violence against men? And explain why you think what you think. So we come to our discussion with Mr. Fidel Sanatan and Ms. Renee Williams, Community Mediation Services Division of the Ministry of Sport and Community Development. Both of them are there. And we're talking about the question of co-parenting. This is cycle 2, they say. Let's tell you a little bit about the program. It is a program that is a group therapy intervention which was created out of a necessity to equip parents exiting romantic relationships and marriages with the knowledge and skills to continue working with their former partners for the development and happiness of their child. This is number 11 in the series of modules for co-parenting. It will be conducted virtually and will encompass 3 cycles with a duration of 4 months per cycle. Each cycle of the program will train 60 persons, which means at the completion of the program, a total of 180 persons would have been so served. So Mr. Sanatan and Ms. Williams, good morning. Good to have both of you.
Good morning, Andy. Thank you for having us here.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, it's good for you to be here. So let's start with you, Ms. Williams. So this is cycle 2 in it, as we said.
Hi, good morning. Yes, it is cycle 2. And actually, Mr. Sanatan is the team lead for the co-parenting. We also have another program going on at this point in time, which is going to start on the 7th of April, which is the Community Empowerment Program.
And do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The Community Empowerment Program was started because we recognize at Community Mediation Services Division that we don't just want to be present a reactive solution, which will be mediation. We also wanted to equip persons with the skills to resolve conflict before they escalated. So we decided to look into things like anger management, conflict de-escalation, effective communication, emotional intelligence, all these types of skills that would help persons to de-escalate conflict so that when they do get in conflict inevitably, because we are all not the same and we believe conflict is inevitable. When we do get into conflict, we would be able to de-escalate the conflict before it reaches to the point of the court or mediation.
All right, but you say the court or mediation, but in a lot of cases, you suggesting that people opt for mediation instead of going to court, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yes, because we want persons to be able to resolve the conflict in an amicable environment. And sometimes the court, unfortunately, does not allow us to do that. And when it is persons go to the court, sometimes it's also not confidential. So we would want persons to come to mediation, of course, first, right, before going to the court. But we do know that not everyone will be comfortable with coming to mediation or trying mediation before they try the court, right? But we... Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask, let's switch to Mr. Sanatan for a moment. Why is that the case? Why people tend to, it's because we grew up thinking that courts are where disputes are taken, or in some cases people like the fact that it's more contentious and we come to these things with a certain amount of aggression and discontent and wanting to punish the other person as much as is possible. Mr. Sanatan?
Well, I'll start at the surface level and then go deeper. At the surface level, I would say that a lot of persons don't know what mediation is. So many times we get persons who think it's meditation. They think it's community meditation services, that we're going to build out a top and have people chanting. That's not the case. Mediation is a situation where 2 or more parties are in dispute. And what we do is that we appoint a third neutral party who is a mediator that allows them to resolve that dispute through dialogue. And it was created, I should say our division was created, and there's mediation legislation. We govern under the Mediation Act of 2004. And it was created to allow persons a free, voluntary, and confidential way to resolve their matters through dialogue. And that tradition is something that isn't foreign to us. It's something that comes locally. We have in the East Indian or Indo-Trinidadian culture, we have the Panchayat. And in the Afro-Trinidadian tradition, there's talk about GAYAP and basically communities coming together to resolve their issues. So I think our name, mediation, is unfamiliar to people. And there is a view that the court is the only way that you could get a resolution. But even the court refers matters to us because, as I'm sure persons may be aware, the process for the court is longer, and it's also a system that has its limitations. Whereas with mediation, the clients have their own voice, they're allowed to speak, and they can represent themselves. And the cost, the actual financial cost, is less. So there is some confusion with the name and confusion about the process. But once persons actually come to us, and many of them are referred by the magistrate's court, they find it to be not the foreign or strange thing. So our reputation is growing. I should say our good reputation is growing.
Yeah, all right. I want to pick up on something you said in referring to what would have been sort of cultural, religious approaches to these things. You say in the Hindu community there is the panchayat, and you say in the Afro community there is talk about a GAIAP. It appears as though, the GAIAP system is some distance behind what we understand the panchayat to be, if you see where I'm coming from. So that for a lot of people, the panchayat has been there. It has been working in some communities with some people, but for us, let me say, we're still struggling with a form of that kind of resolution to be acceptable. Is that a correct kind of?
Well, what I would say to that is that what we try to encourage and instill with people, because we are part of the Ministry of Sport and Community Development, is that communities coming together to resolve issues that are affecting them is not foreign to the history of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. It's something that we have done in the past. We have formalized a structure for persons to do it in the present so that in the future, when conflicts do happen, and it's not because people are bad, it's because we're human and we come from things from different perspectives. So conflict is actually normal. The way that we resolve the conflict to have a peaceful resolution that is not violent and one that everybody could live with, building that infrastructure is where we want to go. So in our history, we had a system that was more informal. And from that informal history, we've moved to a more formalized system with the power of legislation behind it as well, and an institution, which is the Community Mediation Services Division, to assist persons in the present and in the future as well. I hope that answers the question.
Well, yeah, to a great extent. But let me come back to you, Ms. Williams, on that business about, so this is, we're coming at the question of mediation from two angles, right? From two poles. One is to address conflict among couples, and we're talking parents here, when they're breaking up, what's the best means of breaking up with the interests of the child? And the other one is we're talking about conflict in communities, and to a lot of extent, that is major because communities are falling apart because some people don't feel that they can talk to other people in the community because everything is resolved by some means of violence, and who has the greatest strength tends to rule. How are your services treating with that and making any kind of input, making any kind of having any kind of influence on that level?
Okay,
from that angle.
And that's where the community empowerment program comes in, because we try to, as I indicated before, try to empower persons with these skills, as you say, to talk to their neighbors, because it is becoming a lost art, I believe. We are no longer using the adage, it takes a village to raise a child. Everybody is within their own home, within their own space, right? So we want to encourage persons to get back to that point, becoming able to effectively communicate with your neighbors, with the persons that are in your community, in your society, being emotionally intelligent, so that you can be aware of the things that are happening around you and within yourself. Learning anger management skills, because as we have gone through, and we still are in this pandemic, persons have had to deal with loss, right? They are not only the physical loss of a loved one, but also the loss of things that are intangible. They may have had hopes and dreams. They may have set some goals that they cannot yet achieve because of this pandemic. That is also dealing with loss. So all these topics that we are going to be dealing with in the community empowerment program would really be benefiting the community and hopefully bringing the communities together. Because when persons are empowered with these skills, they can hopefully go and speak with their families, their children, their loved ones, and open that gateway of communication between them, between their neighbors, and hopefully have that discussion on, okay, this is a skill I learned, and this is something that I intend to practice and use.
Are there parts of the country where these community intervention programs are taken more to heart than in others? Because, as you're talking, both of you, I'm rehearsing in my head, the tune that is her contribution this year. What's her name? Patrice. What is it? Drink water and mind my business.
At this point in time, previously, no. Because when we were able to, we will go all throughout the country. We have been to Sans Souci, we have been to Citrus, right? So previously, no, and we would partner with our sister division, Community Development Division, in finding out from their community development officers, which were the communities and what topics they wanted, because not all topics will be appropriate for each community. So now that it is virtual, yes, there may be parts of the country, which may have less consistent access to internet. But I think now it opens it up even more, because persons would not have to necessarily take a day off of work, and they may not have to travel, even though it was being offered in their community. They may not have to travel to the nearest location. However, I would say that we have had persons in the past who came to 3 locations because they wanted to participate in our community empowerment program. It was well as subscribed, and I would say even last year when we did it virtually, it was very well subscribed.
Yeah, I don't want to, Mr. Sanathan, I don't want to pick on any community to appear to be stigmatizing any, but there are some communities where the issues are more riper for the picking than in others, and how does the program work such that you all get to focus on community A, let's say an urban community, as opposed to a rural community, where there are challenges among members of the community? In some cases, the challenges have to do with young people's truancy and bad behavior. In other communities, it has to do with who lives on what plot of land and who has title to it and them kinds of things.
All right. I'm so happy you asked that particular question, because in terms of what we do at mediation, we deal with civil matters as well as family matters, and that is defined by the court. So civil matters would cover things like land disputes, issues between neighbors, business partners, landlord, tenant, and family matters would cover things like custody and divorce and child support, etc. When it comes to criminal matters, under the legislation we operate under, we are not supposed to deal with criminal matters. So that is the remit of the TTPS and judiciary, where it is that we do offer our services with the civil and the family. We have centers throughout the country. So we have 8 centers from Port of Spain down to Point Fortin, where persons could access our services. We are doing stuff. When I say stuff, we're providing our services via the telephone and virtually, so persons don't even have to bear the cost of leaving their community. We're actually reaching out to them, and they can access services that way. And we do work with our community development division when there are specific needs of specific communities to be met. Always with our programs, there is a generalized aspect to it, because especially now, we have our services being provided virtually. So we get large groups of people. For our CEP program last year, we had sometimes between 200 and 250 people attending one workshop, all right, virtually. So it was phenomenal, the response we got from the public. But always, these programs we have are additional to the individual services that come forward. So what we found as well is that we would offer a large workshop, and persons would say that they need individual attention, and we would treat with them afterwards. So the workshops and programs are really a gateway to our individual services, which we have staff for to provide throughout the country.
All right, so Ms. Williams, so this is, you all are restarting an 11 11 module program, or you somewhere along with that program, if we talk about the CEP?
Okay, so the CEP is actually 8 topics.
Yes.
Which is anger management, if you'll allow me to call them out.
Yes.
It starts with effective communication. Then we go to anger management, stress management, conflict de-escalation, time management, building trust as a professional, emotional intelligence, and managing social isolation. So that is an 8-topic session that will run over about 2-month period, right? So persons can register in the few days before each module starts. Okay, so they can go onto the ministry's website or the ministry's Facebook page and they will see the registration link. So for instance, for effective communication, which starts on the 7th of April, registration will be open between the 1st and the 6th of April. With regards to the co-parenting program, it is a 11-module program workshop, which will be run weekly, where persons can really gain understanding of how they can co-parent with this person that is now their ex, right? Because sometimes it can be difficult to keep the child in focus when it is you are dealing with pain or hurt after the breakup of a relationship.
And a lot of times you find that the child is used as a pawn on one side or the other, and how do you get people to go over that hump, so to speak?
Yes, and the programs that are dealt with in co-parenting would help persons to deal with that. Some of the things that they deal with is also understanding the developmental process of the child. And even across the board, parents need to understand that. But I believe that it's also important for parents who are separating, who may be in high conflict situations, to understand the developmental process of the child, as well as understanding how they can manage their own emotions. Mr. Sanatan, I believe you also have some additional list of the topics.
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Well, if I'm free to go through it, the 11 sessions or 11 modules of the co-parenting program, we would start with what is co-parenting, and then specifically to Andy's question about conflict. One of the deepest sessions in terms of the therapy that we do is on separation and emotions, which is the second session. After that, we cover the impact of communication styles on co-parenting relationships, then the effects of conflict on children, then visitation, restoring control in parenting, consistency and maintenance, drafting a co-parenting agreement, and then who am I as a partner? New relationship, is the right partner present for me and for my child? And then developing a successful blended family. Initially, there were 9 modules, but what we found in terms of feedback from parents is that many of the persons wanted to start new relationships. So we added on those last 3 in terms of new relationship. Is this right for me and my child? Who am I as a partner? And how to create a successful blended family to help persons pivot, not from just the pain of the previous relationship, but to be prepared for new relationships that would come as well.
All right. So we got to go, but in case people who are watching and when they watch and they want to get in touch with you, or if they become interested, how do they get in touch?
But Renee, you would go first?
Yeah. So we have several of our numbers. They can also visit the Ministry of Sport and Community Development website, MSCD, www.mscd.com. Also our Facebook page, Ministry of Sport and Community Development. On our website, they can go to the mediation tab. Also, you can contact our centers at 225-4267 or 625-6088, 648-2810 or 648-2888, 497-6086.
All right, Mr. Sanatan and Ms. Williams, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having us.
Hope you have a great day.
And we wish you all the success with this program. it seems that this should have been under the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, but that's for somebody else in a different pay grade. Thank you very much.
Have a good day. Bye.
Same to you as well. Okay, so as we take you up to the top of the hour, let's tell you about let's show you what's happening, what has happened in Cuba, where people have been given decades in prison sentences for their participation in the protests calling for more democracy and accountability in that country a couple of months ago.
19-year-old Orlando Carvajal Cabrera has just been sentenced to prison for 20 years, longer than he's been alive. It's what you get for defying Cuba's one-party state, says his distraught mother.
I imagine it wants to stop people from continuing to protest so they won't take to the streets. All I know is that my son's sentence is too extreme for a young man who only threw a few rocks. He had a lawyer, but the sentence was already predetermined.
Carvajal was among the thousands of Cubans who took part in unprecedented nationwide protests against the communist government 8 months ago. Amid a severe economic recession, they demanded better living conditions and freedom. Of the 790 protesters arrested and accused of vandalism, sedition, and public disorder, so far 127 have been tried and sentenced to between 4 and 30 years in prison, in many cases longer than for far more severe crimes. 19-year-old Daniela Alejandra del Campo's husband, Yaciel, is one of them.
He's losing all his youth, his life as a youngster. He says he feels like dying.
The vast majority of the accused are young people. So far, only one person has been acquitted. While the prosecution insists that due process is being guaranteed, family members and activists charge that the trials lack transparency and that the penalties are disproportionately long and harsh. President Miguel Díaz-Canel accuses the United States of inciting the mass protests. The harsh penalties against them send an unequivocal message to disgruntled Cubans that there is a high price to be paid for showing it publicly. Lucia Newman, Al Jazeera.
All right, that's Cuba for you today in 2022. We take a break. There's news at 7 o'clock. We continue on the other side. Stay with us. This is AM Prime.
Seven is out. All day is in. WESN News on the hour.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
In this season, we talk more about health,
wellness, and everything in between. I am so excited to share with you everything about health and wellness so that you can design the life that you've always dreamed of. Join me here on What's Up Doc.
What's Up Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN, Content Capital.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing on it.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is it no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
Burning questions, urgent topics. Welcome back to One on One, the show where we tackle the most current and pertinent subjects that are affecting all citizens, where we ask the hard questions and have in-depth conversations. What separates One on One from other talk shows is that the conversation stems from a younger perspective on topics that affect the fabric of our society. One on One, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on WESN Content Capital.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
It may seem like the hardest thing to do right now, but we all need each other to wear a mask, wash our hands, watch our physical distance, and stay at home. We need you safe. Together we can make the difference. Together we can curb the spread of COVID-19. So let's be responsible in our actions. The Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society. Mission-based, people-focused, community-driven.
Welcome back to the program where we'll tell you what the headline in the Newsday this morning. 3 of the 5 prison escapees are still on the run. They got 2 of them back in there. We'll show you what's that and other stories in the Newsday Trinidad and Tobago and the Newsday Tobago up ahead. But right now we're talking with Ms. Ava Billard. She's an acting consumer advocate at Level 2 at the Ministry of Trade and Industry. We're talking, continuing a discussion we had with one of her colleagues last week, and this has to do with fair trade finance. That was on the agenda for our discussion last week, but we dealt with other interesting matters from the ministry regarding, well, how they do business and how they encourage people to do business. Fair digital finance, that's what we're talking about. First of all, what does that mean? Ms. Ava Billard, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning, and thank you for having us. So every year, the Consumer International and members of the Consumer International, of which Trinidad and Tobago is a member, they produce a theme for World Consumer Rights Day, and it is called the theme for this year is Fair Digital Finance, and digital financial services are services which depend on technologies for the delivery and for use by consumers. So digital technologies, they say, are reshaping all areas of finance, primarily payments, lending, insurance services, wealth management, and stuff like that. So last year's theme was tackling plastic pollution, and we had poster competitions and quizzes where we engaged the younger members of society, the secondary students. But this year, the focus is on making sure that there is inclusion from the vulnerable population.
Regarding digital finance?
Regarding digital finance. We had our webinar on the 15th, and we had members from the financial services sector, Financial Services Ombudsman, TTIFC, and Bankers Association. And we dealt with issues like protecting the digital consumer, making online financial services fair, safe, protective, and inclusive. And we looked at fraud prevention as well, and how the consumer is responsible for making sure that the transactions online are safe.
All right, so somebody who is as uninitiated as I am, what is digital finance?
So we're looking at the fear in the digital finance is we want to make sure that when people use digital finance, or we want people to move from a move from a cash society to a cashless society, that they are included, that the financial services such as what I just explained, the payments, lending, your insurance, we want to make sure that when they're accessing those services, the fair part of it comes into play. They feel included, because what we found when we had the webinar, according to the TTIFC, is that only 67% of the population is banked, and the rest are unbanked. And the unbanked are because probably they just can't afford to maintain a bank account. They're homeless. They're people who are part of the vulnerable population that are probably just not tech savvy. They're just not they're technologically challenged. So we want to make those services that we just put out there, primarily payments, insurance, wealth management, all those things, we want to make that part of it fair for those that are vulnerable in the population.
And how are you all set about doing that? What's the method by which you do that, make it fair?
Well, when we discussed it in the webinar, they wanted to look at making payments accessible across the government services. We wanted to make sure that when people do access the service, that they're able to afford it. They wanted to also make sure that when we partner with the Office of Financial Services Ombudsman, we have literacy. So the National Financial Literacy Program looks at making sure that people understand what they're getting into when they access financial services. So we want to make sure that whatever that they're getting into, even if that they decide to get into the banking sector or move from being unbanked to being banked, that they understand that what they're getting into, and that they become a little more tech savvy, and that they are able to access the services.
I will go back what you said. The statistics say that 60% of the population is people who deal with banks and so on. The rest...
67. That was the statistic we got from the TTIFC.
Yeah.
67% of the population are banked, and of those, 14%, I think, the accounts are not active. 14% of that 67. So it's a alarming figure. And so we want to try do our part, because financial services is not our forte, it's not our remit. But at the same time, we deal with consumers, and consumers access financial services. So we want to play our part in making sure that it is fair and it is safe, because that's one of the things that keep coming up. If I access it, will my identity be compromised? Things like that. So people just want to make sure that when they access the services, especially the vulnerable population and those that are unbanked, that it is fair, safe, secure, and those aspects.
Right. So the webinar took place already. What some of the takeaways you find from it, and is there what's going forward? with bringing people further up the literacy chart with these matters?
Well, the Office of Financial Services Ombudsman spoke on behalf of the central banks, speaking about making more financial services available through the National Financial Literacy Program, making sure that people understand what they're getting into and how to access it to make it more inclusive. The TTIFC spoke about the FinTech Hub and making sure that it starts with the government services and making the cashless drive or the e-money drive across all sectors of government, so that once we start there, it can act as a ripple. And I'm hoping that it happens across all government institutions and probably to the private sector as well. So that we want to go along those lines. And Bankers Association spoke about their way forward was making sure that once those that are vulnerable, once they get in there, the responsibility is to make sure that they protect their passwords when they get on. If it is that they have any issues with fraud, because they were from the perspective of fraud, because it's something that's on increase. So they wanted to make sure that while we were promoting this, that citizens are aware that fraud is on the rise and how they can, when they do access the service, make sure that they go about trying to secure their accounts.
And so we're talking about things like, I only know these things from reading and hearing people talking about blockchain and Bitcoin and so on, right?
No, we didn't go into the realm of cryptocurrency.
Yeah, so that's cryptocurrency as opposed to digital currency.
Yes. It didn't go into the realm of that. There are persons who are engaged in trading, and there are services that are available. They did point that out, the TTIFC. But the discussion wasn't from that aspect, but just from the general aspect of the fear in the digital finance and making the vulnerable population inclusive, bringing them into the fort because of the 67% rate of banked individuals in the country, and they wanted to make sure that going forward, that vulnerable part of the population is included.
Yeah, you're a woman, and I'd seen some correspondence from organizations representing women's rights coming out of the pandemic and the challenges people had there, and talking about promoting acceptance of women's rights in terms of the question of doing business and finance. And there seemed to be a sense that there's discrimination happening in that sector. Making finance available to more women and women's organizations, because that seems to be a problem for women wanting to get into business or when you just get into the economy. There were these submissions to the roadmap to recovery team about making business avenues and opportunities more sensitive to women's rights and women's needs. How does that get to factor into this?
Well, Andy, you're giving me information. I know that the Ministry of Trade and Industry has partnered with She Trades, I think. But that's what I know, as far as I know. And I think it's a drive to make women more inclusive in the entrepreneurship area.
Yes.
Make finance more available.
Yes.
Through SME loans.
Yes.
But no. So I know of it, but you're giving me more information than what I would know. So I didn't delve. I know of it, and I know that there is a drive to make, because I think that there is a belief, well, there seems to be a belief that women are part of the marginalized group, and they want to bring them more into the line of the entrepreneurship and pushing business for women. So I know She Trades is there under the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and I know that there are programs where women can access small loans and SMEs can access small loans. So
precisely, the creator what's called a better platform, a smoother platform for women who want to get involved in business activity of one kind or another. And they say that the system sort of blocks access in a lot of cases. So, but that's not sort of the central focus of what you're talking about. You're talking about fair digital finance and so on. Making it accessible to
a particular vulnerable part of the population. We had questions from the TTARP as well, trying to address it and to bring it more to the fore, because the TTARP is the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Retired Persons.
Yes.
And there is the belief, I mean, while I'm saying there is the belief, I know anecdotally that there are people over the age of 60 who are technologically challenged, and so they would fall into that group of persons who would be affected if it is that we do go cashless, if it is that there is more of an e-money drive. And so the focus is on the fear in the digital finance, just to make sure that when we're going this direction, that we look at the persons who are unbanked, look at the reasons why they are unbanked, and try to bring them into the fold and get them into the banking system.
Yeah, so are there provisions for sort of follow-ups on some of these things, particularly where it comes to respecting and protecting consumer rights in this regards? So in these regards, so where do you go from here then?
I know that the TTIFC has a 2023 mandate to make sure that these persons are included. The National Financial Literacy Program also has pledged to going forward to make sure that these groups are included, to help them ease their way into the financial sector. Those who have fallen off want to make sure that they get on, as far as I know. And of course, we have our part to play as Consumer Affairs Division, because the team came from the Consumers International to make sure that we sensitize the public. So going forward, so when we given the theme is for the entire year until March the 15th next year. So what we do is we continue the drive. We engage members of the public. We engage NGOs. We engage government institutions as well, agencies, sensitizing them to fair digital finance, what it would mean going forward. So we have the educational part of it, and the other institutions that we partnered with or collaborated with also have their part to play. So we're all going forward, we're looking at our education drive, our empowerment drive, and the TTIFC is looking also at making the government agencies and departments tech savvy and cashless, and the Office of the Financial Services Ombudsman together with the Central Bank with the National Financial Literacy Program.
What is your own experience and the experience of your division, say, in driving home this ambition for a cashless society? In some cases, you still have a lot of people who just sort of terrorized and terrified by even understanding what it means to be living in a cashless society, what it involves.
Well, if not even talking cashless, we're talking even technology. There's that fear because of the pandemic, a lot of the businesses went digital, went virtual. Even we were forced to do so, and we stopped seeing members of the public, and we asked that all our complaints come through our email, consumeraffairs@gov.tt. And there was pushback simply because it's just a matter of a change. Technology is something that people are still afraid of and don't trust. And our culture is of such also that there is a mistrust of technology in general. So you wouldn't have that uptake, and we still had persons presenting to our offices with paper to submit the complaints. So we have a task ahead of us, even as Consumer Affairs, to drive this. Our experience has not been on the digital financial side of it, but because people access goods and services, the finance comes in, and we will hear anecdotal evidence of people having issues. So our remit is not that, but it comes by extension when we deal with consumers and we hear about their experiences when they access financial services. So we know we have that part to play with the digital divide altogether. So our job is twofold, the digital part of it and the financial digital part of it as well.
Yes, so these are steps along the way, and there's going to be a lot of going forward with this before.
We'll climb, and we're doing it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Ava Billard, Acting Consumer Advocate 2. That's your grade, right? 2. That's what I mean.
Right. Noel, but if I give on, I know you won't send the correct information.
Okay.
So, but thank you for having me, and thank you for allowing us to use your platform to promote. I just want to also advise consumers that you can reach us at our 800 number. It's toll-free, 800-427-7, and we're still accepting complaints via email, consumeraffairs@gov.tt, and our Facebook, Consumer Affairs Division, TNT.
All right, so what you said is your correct designation, so that people know?
Yes, Consumer Advocate 2.
All right, good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. All right, so let's tell you, watch this. This person is referred to as a food vlogger. His name is David Hoffman. He visited Trinidad and Tobago recently, and he has decided that this country is the food capital of the Caribbean. Look at it.
So we have the Benet sticks. David, you want to try one?
Yes, of course. Going out.
Oh, sesame seeds, lots of sugar, very compact. Really yummy. Crunchy, that's what we're talking about. Molasses, sugar inside there. It's very Moorish.
Very Moorish.
It means you want more.
This is the oil goes on it.
Beautiful oil. As you see, guys, it's starting to fluff up, right? Ooh, it's that golden brown. Ooh, and the heat under here. Wow, look at that, beautiful. I love it. This bread. This is truly amazing, guys. Look at this. Just go in here, grab whatever, everything, right? Look at that. This is the mango?
Yeah, that's the curry mango that she made earlier on Sunday. Made that. Really good, huh?
It's almost like pickled.
Exactly.
I'll keep going.
Don't fill up too much, brother.
But this is how it is in South India, you know?
Yeah.
Can't leave anything.
All right, so with that leads the man to say that we are the food capital of the Caribbean. So where in Trinidad and Tobago is the food capital of Trinidad and Tobago? That probably is a quest we should go on as well. Well, we told you some of what is on the paper this morning, the Newsday. 3 of the 5 prison escapees from yesterday are still on the run. 2 have been recaptured. There's a big story in the paper today. We were in too deep. Remember the story yesterday about the husband and wife who committed suicide after leaving notes for their family and their children. That's what they're talking about here. We were in too deep. That's what this story is. This is the front page of the Trinidad and Tobago Newsday this morning. This is the back page. And the front page of the Tobago Newsday, always do your best. The Tobago's lone skull winner shines in the pandemic and telling compatriots to do that. And the story of the dream on the back page. You should get your copies early and get them under the way and out of the way. Well, that's our broadcast for this morning. We want to thank you for watching. As always, I want to tell you can get in touch with us here at AM Prime, at WESNCC on all our social media platforms, and you can send your emails to amprime@wesncc.com. That will do it for us, but at the top of the hour, there's news at the hour, and followed by today's edition of Talking Point. Shah is back, so Shah and Small. But for now, I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.